Shane Bieber. Why in the world would he sign a 1 year, $12 million deal? Except he did. And he accepted his player option. No one quite knows why. And I won't get into, there could be some idiosyncratic reasons, right? Like he could have some lingering physical issue that we don't know about. There could be, everybody who's like associated with the Blue Jays wants to sell it as he just loves the Blue Jays so much.
No, not just them. It's even like jaded Cubs fan. They're like, imagine a player wanting to be with the team. I'm like, do you think he wants to be with the team instead of having $100 million?
That is not how this works.
Also, he could have had both.
He could have had both. He could have, unless something's weird happening,
right?
He could have opted out and then been like, hey, Blue Jays, I'll come back for $14 million.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
It just doesn't make sense. So you had that one, and you had Jack Flaherty making a similar but little more understandable decision with the Tigers to stick there for $20 million for next year. He was on a little bit of a down year by the results. The peripherals were really good, yada, yada. So I look at those decisions, though, and I think, wait a minute. If Shane Bieber and his agents are looking at this market and they're saying 112 is a good deal, and Flaherty's looking at this market with his people and they're saying 120 is a good deal, then if Shota Imanaga gets offered 122, in what universe would he be justified in turning that down? And if that's the case, then really what the question is, do the Cubs want Shota at 122 when this might be a market where guys in that same tier, maybe even a little better, Bieber, Flaherty, are getting less? So I now think, here I'm playing my stamp and I'll be wrong, I think maybe he's not going to get a qualifying offer today.
Yeah. And so here's a couple thoughts that I've been wanting to get out and mostly to get your reaction to when it comes to Shota. So on the one hand, it seems like, okay, keeping out those other decisions out of your mind, you go, well, of course you're going to make him the offer. I mean, 2 minutes ago, we were like, of course you're going to say yes to his option. Right. So that the Overton window is already changing a little bit on what's totally obvious of what you should do. And I'm going, well, okay, it'll be nice to give him the qualifying offer, which he'll decline. And then we get another chance at a compensation pick like we will with Kyle Tucker. And then maybe the Cubs can go out and sign a qualified free agent of their own because the, relative hit on signing that guy is a little bit less when you have these extra picks coming in. But because he's likely to accept it, my thinking has changed to then contemplate this question, which I'm going to tee up to you now. It feels almost likely to me that the Cubs would prefer to have Shota on a 1 year, $22 million deal than a 3 year, $57 million deal. And I think a lot of people, or whatever the conversion is on when his option would have been picked up, or otherwise it could have been 15 million, point being paying him more money, but for 1 year, but just 1 year on an AAV, basis. And a lot of people seem to think that, having him on a 15 million AAV for 3 years is like so much better, but I don't know if I think that's the case. And in that way, it does make me feel like you do extend him the offer because, hey, 1 year and 22 million actually is not a crazy bad outcome if he does accept it. And if he doesn't, you have the benefit of the extra pick. So that's kind of why I'm like, maybe you do still offer him.
Well, I mean, I think the question ultimately is more about the market and your projection for Shota, right? Like it's easy. Your first point is, I think, quite correct that pick the number, but 1 year and 22 million, I think, is for these Cubs, especially, vastly preferable to 3 and 45.
Right.
Whatever. I think there's no question. That was a philosophy of Theo's, that he was a big, like, there's no such thing as a bad 1 year deal. Mm-hmm. I think Jed seems to subscribe to that as well. But even setting that aside, it's like, well, there's going to be a CBA fight after 2026. I think front offices this offseason are going to be super duper heavily weighted toward wanting 1 year deals. And so your point there is correct, but we can't just look at like, okay, so is Shota worth 1 and 22? Is that okay? Would you be fine with it? Yeah, because it is. I don't know. Like, that's a gut thing. Like, yeah, I would take a shot at him at 1 and 22. But that's not really the question. It's what else could you do with that 22 million?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, what if a lot of guys are going to feel pressure to take 1-year deals? And then what if you could get someone a little better? And I mean, I'm going to cheat a little bit on our like topic order thing, because I'm going to throw a question back at you. So this morning, the Cubs semi-extended, it's sort of a mini extension with Colin Rea. He had an option for next year, but they basically converted it into, we'll pay you for next year and tack on an option for 2027. I think most people are expecting the Cubs to retain Colin Rea. Roughly $6 million for next year, we'll call it. Do you think Shota Imanaga, no money, just projection, performance, is 80% likely to outperform Colin Rea next year? 90% likely? 50% likely? How do you think about them as pitchers? And then once you do that, does it alter the way you're thinking about what kind of price tag someone like Shota should justify on a 1-year deal?
Yeah, well, so I don't want to sidestep your question, but I actually think I have the exact answer, and it's a completely different way to look at it. And I think that there's 100% likelihood that Shota Imanaga has more upside than Colin Rea, and that's what you're paying for. And so even if that percentage of who's likely to be better is like 50-50, it's like, 50-50 baseline, but that's Colin Rea's ceiling. And Shota, I think, does still retain some of the upside that Colin Rea does not have. And that's what I think you're paying for. And I'd say that 3 days ago, I was like, no, like let him walk. But honestly, Bieber and Flaherty were like two of my favorite options. Maybe my top 2 favorite options.
Realistic ones.
Ones. Yes, of course. There's, in that sort of tier of pitcher. Yeah. And so now that they're gone, I'm like, I mean, now you're talking like Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Eflin, those guys that are like, and Shota is not that dissimilar to them in that he has pitched at a high level. He's had some recent issues, and he's going to cost roughly X amount of dollars. And we know we like Shota, and we've seen what he can do and how he can succeed. So that's why it's a little bit trickier. Had Flaherty and Bieber not done this, I've been like, do not give him that qualifying offer and go up your offer to either of those two guys. But they're not there anymore. So I don't know. But again, that circles right back to, if they're not there because they accepted these deals because they don't think there's going to be a market, then there's no way Shota's worth $22 million, and you could just pay him less or one of his alternates. So you're right. And now that I've talked it all through, I think it's kind of hard to imagine them giving him that offer.
I think you would have to have certain beliefs about his second half and about his projection into next year. I mean, he's not like ancient or anything, but he'll be 32. And we saw some fastball decline, and I think maybe even more concerningly than a little bit of decline in the velocity is just didn't have as much ride, and he wasn't locating it at the top of the zone as well.
Pretty much all season, he wasn't locating at the top of the zone.
Yeah, and his walk rate, of course, still very small, but it ticked up a little bit, and his strikeout rate was ticking down. And when both of those things get squeezed
significantly,
it was like from 25 to 20, I think.
Yeah,
when your walk rate jumps too, then that squeezes really significantly, and suddenly a guy who allows 1 or 2 or 3 homers a game, instead of those being typically solo shots, often they aren't. And we know 1 3-run homer, that can be the ball game. And I think it's possible there are teams out there that have really homer unfriendly ballparks that might say, oh, you know what, we project him really well here, actually. And kind of like Shota 2024 with the Cubs. I don't know.
Paredes with the Astros. I mean, it's just like the right fit.
Right fit. And I don't know that the Cubs are going to see themselves as that at all. And that's the thing that's kind of been hitting me this week is like, not is he worth 122 to the Cubs? It's, do they just simply prefer to move on? And it reminds me a little bit of when the Cubs signed. This is not like a Asian pitcher comparison. It's just this. You'll see why I compare this.
Racist.
I know, someone hit the dump button. When the Cubs signed Yu Darvish, 6-year deal, got some great years out of him. And then Jed Hoyer took over as president and traded him that offseason after 2020. It was financially motivated. But a comment that Jed made is, when you sign a guy in his 30s to a 6-year deal and you get great performance at the front, that you're hoping to be able to get that. And then if you can get out of the latter years while getting value in trade, he's like, that's like, you may love the guy, but that's like the best possible outcome. And there's no trade here. There's no, it isn't the same, but the Cubs just got out of the back end years of what Shota could have been signed for. They got 2 good years at the front and now they're out of it. And it's like, maybe they just don't project him very well from here. And they got what they wanted and that's it.
No, I think that's fair.
We should button this up by saying, because we don't know what's going to happen. They may make him the offer. He may accept right away. And, none of that is going to bother me in the least. Whatever way this goes, I'm sort of more interested to dissect it than I am to claim that I prefer one approach or the other. Sure. Because if the Cubs keep Shota, then let's look at that second half and let's figure out exactly what happened. If not, then let's look at the rest of the market and see what else the Cubs can do.
Yeah. And one little final note is that, the CBT first threshold this year, I think, is 246 million, something like that, around there. And the Cubs are at like 165, 170 right now.
They were like 70-ish under. Yeah.
That's a lot of money without too many holes to fill.
Right.
Generally speaking. So if the Cubs do give Shota that deal and he's here on 22 million, they still have a lot of room to add. And that shouldn't prevent them from adding what still needs to be the top of the rotation starter one way or another, free agency or trade. Who knows how that'll go. I'm a little scared that the projections for Dylan Cease are all like $170 million. I kind of didn't see that coming.
Well, we talked about Max Fried like that last time we talked, where I was like, I don't know. I could see them trying to push for something like what he got. And that is that range. That
is right. But my point is just that if they do keep him even at that higher 1-year value, I do still think there's a chance that he's, a useful pitcher. And they should have plenty of money to spend without a ton of holes to fill. So that's okay. It's just not necessarily, you prefer the flexibility, I think,
Would have preferred it more if Bieber and Flaherty were still on the market.
Oh my God. I'm so bummed by that.
Let's actually, you were right. We talked off mic and I was wrong. You were right about combining these last two things. So why don't you set up the it's not a game, set up the, transaction corner thing. And then I'll preface the name with the discussion. So you'll see, but yeah, you were right. And for everyone listening's purposes, you won't know the content of what we're talking about, but just, this is me saying Michael was right about something and I was wrong.
Actually, you cut out there. What'd you say?
Yes, this is something, Michael never hears at home. And I get that, we don't get that enough. So we need to share it with each other. Yes. You were right, Michael. I was wrong. You were right.
Oh my God. I love it. This week's Transaction Corner is brought to you by Feltco. Feltco, the home renewal experts. Bleacher Nation is proud to partner with Feltco. For almost 50 years, Feltco has been transforming Chicagoland homes with their windows, siding, doors, and roofing. Feltco is family owned and prides themselves in delighting their customers. With products made in the U.S. and designed specifically for the Midwest, Feltco offers the perfect balance of beauty and energy efficiency. As a reminder, we're not doing the game, so to speak, to start the offseason at least. We've transitioned it into the Transaction Corner, where we're going to talk about, a free agent or a player or a deal that we, not necessarily think will happen or even should happen, but is just in the realm of the Cubs world and periphery. And I think we're going to attack it a little bit differently this time because we had some other topics we wanted to feed right into that. So Brett?
Yeah. So what happened was this week, for those who didn't see, the Cubs traded Andrew Kittredge back to the Orioles. He had an option decision. That is to say, the Cubs had an option decision on him. It was a $9 million option for next year. The $1 million buyout seemed pretty reasonable. It appears the Cubs were not going to pick that up because then they sent him back to the Orioles for, a cash return, which is probably very minimal. And they are going to exercise that option instead. So essentially the Cubs save $1 million by doing that. And we could, have opinions on that. I was hoping they'd bring him back because I thought he pitched really well. And, TBD on whether $8 million is an appropriate price tag for a 1-year deal of a pitcher of that caliber in this market. Again, it's kind of wild to think that Bieber signed for just $4 million more than Andrew Kittredge. But we'll see how that part plays out. But what ended up happening is that reminded me of how many of the Cubs pitchers were going to be departing from the bullpen because we had the advent of free agency as well. And so I just was curious, how many guys in the bullpen who threw at least 20 innings are, still under team control for next year. I knew it was small. I knew Daniel Plencia was one of them. It turns out Porter Hodge is the only other current reliever that threw at least 20 innings for the big league team this year and is still under control for next year. That's basically an entire bullpen that has to be rebuilt in an offseason. And we know the Cubs do that. They do that every year. Also, I think only fair to note, especially with Rea returning, they have Ben Brown, they have Javier Assad, they have Jordan Wicks, they have guys who sort of can flex.
Luke Little.
And then in the 40 man, they also have up down guys, Luke Little, Ethan Roberts, Jack Neely, so on and so forth, Gavin Hollowell. But that it got me thinking, especially at the advent of free agency, like should the Cubs be thinking about bringing back some of these departing relievers, which is something they basically never do. They have these guys succeed, and then unless they're already under team control, they let them go. And specifically for the transaction corner, although feel free to discuss, Drew Pomerantz or Ryan Brazier or Caleb Thielbar if you want to, but I wanted to talk about Brad Keller, who was the biggest breakout of the group, who's only 30, who, of course, in his younger days with the Royals had some significant success as a starting pitcher, really fell off, kind of went into the wilderness, ended up, I believe, having thoracic outlet syndrome surgery at one point. And then he's kind of worked his way back as a reliever to really break out this year with the Cubs, and now has set himself up as a pretty attractive free agent for all of baseball. And I just, we operate on this assumption the Cubs will never bring someone like that back. And so I wanted to set up the discussion. Okay, but should they?
Yeah. So I want to add a little color too. And I think what Jed Hoyer would say, and I'm like slowly find myself believing in this a little bit more, is that, because we've approached this question before and it's like, well, why don't you sign that? Like, it worked. I think that they just think that they can get guys on the up and then never have to pay them. And so you just find the next Brad Keller. And to be clear, it's not like you sign one guy and you hope he's Brad Keller. And no, you sign like 20 and then through spring training, it becomes 10. At the end of April, it's 5. And then by July, you've found 1 or 2 guys, right?
Right.
I mean, truly, that's like how it works. I do think that there's some value in that because you can just take a lot of swings and you might have a little bit more upside because you might find multiple. I will say though that I think we as Cubs fans are way higher on Brad Keller than the league is. I do not see him discussed among the top free agent relief options like at all. And I think it's not entirely implausible that he doesn't have the market he should arguably have based on the season, and could therefore make sense for the Cubs on a deal like the one they just passed on Kittredge, which is like maybe it's like 8 or 9 or 10 million, which is a sort of deal that the Cubs, could or would do, which is, so you see what I'm saying? Like, I think,
you sparked for me. Number of years ago, Cubs had a reliever named Ryan Tepera. People remember MVP vote getter.
Yeah.
Ryan Tepera. He was same mold as so many of these relievers, reclamation type that really broke out. He had sort of added a new kind of half slider, half cutter that was really effective, and he dominated for the Cubs. And then he's hitting free agency, and I think we thought that he might have a robust market. Didn't really happen. And then by the end of the offseason, it was sort of like the Cubs were still there. He was still there. It was like, hey, can we work something out? And they did reunite. So that is a time that it happened. And you're right. You wonder, I feel like that's a stretch for Keller, but that is kind of the model that, okay, you're right. I could see that.
I mean, he was incredible this year, the entire season. He had like 1 or 2 bad outings in September, and I think 1 mediocre playoff outing when he was doing a back-to-back. By all accounts, he should be higher up on the list, but he's not. I mean, he is absolutely not discussed. And even like when Kittredge was traded, it was like, oh, Andrew Kittredge, and it was like,
yeah, because he had a name. Kittredge had been a great reliever with the Rays.
I know, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's interesting. And sometimes, especially in the reliever market, though, I'm thinking back to some off seasons where, because there's so many, there'll be guys that sign deals that were like, wait, what? He got 2 years and 30 million? What? Who? And so it could be that we're just too close to it. And like Keller, among teams, and they're not talking about it, are like looking at him. Sure. And the thing I wonder is past success as a starter.
I know.
Back. I just wonder because he's only 30, and you kind of wonder a little bit of like, could he reconvert back into starting? And like, if you're the Pirates or the, I don't know, the White Sox, and you're like, you know what, he might be thrilled to take 2 years and 22 million from us to try to start. And that's a bargain, worst case. Okay. Move him back into the bullpen, and you overpaid a little bit, but I don't think I think that opportunity with the Cubs is very unlikely.
I think you're right. And I hope that they do keep him. I think he's a good bet. He's young. He was throwing hard. He had command. He looked good. The flip side is like everything, going into the 2024 season, who would have thought Adbert Alzolay wouldn't be good at all?
Oh, yeah.
Going into the 2025 season, who would have thought Porter Hodge wouldn't be good at all? Now, the real parallel there is going into the 2026 season. Who would think Daniel Palencia wouldn't be good at all? That's 3 straight young Cubs coming up.
And I could go back
to the closer role.
Keegan Thompson.
Yeah, that's another. You're right. So whatever, but I don't know. Keller just felt as though he was relying less on like that razor's edge of high octane, like what's going to happen that all of those guys kind of do. He kind of just was like an old fashioned pitcher, even though he was throwing hard.
Well, former starter, you maybe had a little bit of that going for him.
So I do hope they bring him back. He's young. He's paid for 2 Chicago teams. He succeeded with the Cubs. And I think that's something that we probably underestimate, that he might feel like, hey, this is where I'm likely to be good again. And frankly, here's the other thing. If he were to sign a 1-year deal in an organization where he will have a high profile relief job almost by default, and possibly pitch into the playoffs again on a 1-year deal, and he does another 2025, well, then he actually might get paid next year because he'd only be 31 and has 2 good relief years, and you can get real money that way. So financially strategically, it could make sense for Keller to want to be in a place where he will is more likely to succeed and more likely to have the visibility of the late postseason or late, regular season games that matter, and the postseason games that should, arrive again in 2026 with the Cubs. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. There's a chance there,
and maybe that's a situation where the Cubs tell him, hey, put us in your back pocket for late in the offseason. Like go with God, try to find your 3 or 4 year deal. If it's not there for you, let's talk in January or February. And maybe that's when the Cubs become a good 1-year option.
I mean, would you really, I wouldn't give Keller 3 or 4 years right now. And it's like a fine bet, but it's,
well, what you're doing, if you do that, is you are you're getting all the upside of if this past year was legit and sustainable and transformative for him. If you sign him for 330 or whatever, there's tons of upside. If you're right and he sustains that, that's a brilliant deal. but you're absorbing all the risk that it was like, no, that was just like a career year for a guy.
I mean, because go look at his other year. I mean, they haven't been very good.
The joke was, he was let go by the White Sox, the White Sox that broke the record for, he wasn't good enough to be on that team. But he was still, in his defense, I think he was still coming back a little bit from the surgery and sort of finding himself as a reliever. But either way, whatever happens, obviously it was a great year for him in Chicago. Credit to him working his way back, transforming into a different role, adding some significant velocity out of the bullpen. And, whether the Cubs retain him, hopefully they can keep on finding guys like that, that they've been successful the last several years.
No, that's not even entirely true, because they had been successful and we had been banging that drum. And then I feel like there was I guess it was like 2023 was, man, I can't remember if it was 23 or 24, where like it didn't really come together in the bullpen until like August. Like it took like an exceptionally long time. It could have been a different year.
What happened in 23 was David Ross finally found his like 4 guys.
Oh yeah, he rode them,
and then he mowed them down in August and September.
Okay, so maybe it wasn't that year. I remember those. I mean, those guys worked, but then they were absolutely useless by the end of September. And then so maybe it was the year prior. I just remember it being like, oh, that didn't work. And then the last couple of years, it has worked again, and it's like, all right, you guys are good at this. Your point though kind of remains, is that they have a little bit more holes to fill in the bullpen than usual. So I don't know. It seems like a lot of guys that you're a lot more, variability on the floor again, unless they're just like absolutely willing to have Ray, Assad, Wicks, all those guys just be like bullpen arms. And to be fair, that is kind of Craig Counsell-y. So it could be an entirely different, approach. Yeah, outgetters, whatever. So I just, whenever I start hearing a buzzword or phrase, like I'm like, it loses all special meaning. Like, okay, cool. Especially because they started doing it on the playoff broadcast. I don't know if you caught that.
They started saying out.
Yeah, they're like, oh, well, Craig Counsell calls their guys the outgetters.
Oh, I did. I rarely have sound on for those, for reasons like that.
I do. Just don't. And I'm trying to think of what else went down this week. Did anything weird happen? Did anyone sign anyone? Anyone trade for anyone? No, it was Bieber and Flaherty were like the big stories.
Yeah, they definitely.
I just see MLB Network just absolutely going out there and believing that Tariq Skubal is going to the Mets, where he will immediately sign a $400 million deal.
Yeah, I mean, it does. If you're the Tigers, it does make sense, honestly. If you're not going to sign him, if you can get think about if he's the equivalent of Kyle Tucker last year. Okay, well, if you could get a Kyle Tucker like trade return for 1 year of Skubal, I get that he's the best pitcher in baseball. But
do you think that would have their feelings on that, even if they weren't going to be able to extend him, would change if they didn't kind of fall apart? They didn't fall apart, but they did. It was
they
first half of the year
best team in baseball.
Best team,
Yeah, I could see that cutting.
Listen. I wouldn't say he's Kyle Tucker. Skubal is more like
Juan Soto.
Yeah, like Juan Soto.
I just meant because he was like the 1 year.
No, for sure. But you know what I mean? Like Skubal and Skeens are so far above everyone else right now that it's not even like Kyle Tucker, whom that's not a diss against Tucker.
Sure. No.
He would be in whatever the very next uppermost tier of guys is. It's kind of like that argument. It's like, does every team have an ace, or are there 20 aces, or are there like 3 aces?
Well, before Cubs fans are like, wait a minute, should the Cubs be talking about school? Maybe, but keep in mind that the Mets chatter, it all includes Jonah Tong and then a ton more. Well, that's Cade Horton basically. So it'd be Cade Horton plus. And that isn't me, prospect hugging. It's just
no. Cade Horton's not a prospect.
I'd rather
I'm
hang
ready to
Cade
move
Horton.
on. I'm like just believing in I have like terrible optimism about Cade Horton next year. Like I think I've fully bought in. And I don't think I'm ready to handle anything.
The sophomore struggles that he
Yeah,
might
no,
have.
that can't happen. It just needs to be good. Um, yeah, I don't know. The Cubs team is going to be weird next year, man. It's just a lot of guys that are like, I wrote an article about it. It's like, is PCA a superstar or is he like pretty good? Is Seiya Suzuki going to hit 32 home runs again, or is that part going to fade and it's going to be like a 110 way to runs created plus? What do we do without Kyle Tucker? Is Carson Kelly going to be, a superstar for half the year, and then like the last like 15%, he was like
Right.
pretty good again. So I don't know. I'm a little worried. And then Jameson Taillon's older. Ian Happ is older. Justin Steele's coming back from injury. Shota, we don't know if he'd be on the team. And even if he does come back, who knows what he's going to be? I don't know. This is a weird offseason, a weird year coming up.
Yeah, and it's not an obvious offseason either, where you could have a bunch of questions on your team and it's like, well, they have to be answered in the offseason through moves. That's not the case. It's sort of like there's only so much the Cubs can do.
And that includes maybe I heard that I'm not letting you off.
You know that
what else is let's see where did you get that sweatshirt? Okay, fine. I'll let you close it up.
This is the BN Cubs podcast.
I have other things to say.
Take it off air and then we'll write down the best stuff and we'll submit an emergency midweek pod of just Michael's ramblings. It's the BN Cubs podcast. I'm Brett Taylor. That's Michael Cerami. Read our stuff at Bleacher Nation. Please and thanks. We are brought to you by Ankin Law, 312-6million, injury law made personal. And we will be back at you next week. The GM meetings are next week.
Oh, yeah.
Could be some, typically not a lot of action necessarily, but could be some cool rumors to discuss. And we'll hit you.
Foundation is usually laid there. We usually get some good stuff to come out of that from budgets. And I was just about to open up another topic.
I know.
Did you ever notice that if you look, there's a lot of other GMs and presidents out there that will like talk about the payroll.
Yeah. Openly.
Yeah. And it's like, it's so categorically not allowed by Jed Hoyer. It's just kind of funny. Yeah. It's like, I think it was Tigers. Maybe it was Sky Harris. And he was like, yeah, it'll be like around last year, which is 165, blah, blah, blah.
See, it's the same philosophy.
To extend it.
Well, it's the same philosophy that has them waiting till like the absolute last second before any deadline for doing it. Cause like, you never know.
Yeah. You might like
tiny. Yeah. Like you got to preserve every teeny tiny little bit. All right. We already wrapped. What are we doing? We got to go. All right. Goodbye, everyone.